Good morning. Good morning, Commissioners, Chief, Mr. Tefang, Madam Secretary, Mr. Inspector General, Mr. City Attorney, and members of the public. Today is November the 2nd, 2021. It is 9:31 a.m. This is a special meeting of the Los Angeles Board of Police Commissioners. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Good morning, Commissioner Briggs,
Present.
Commissioner Decker, absent. Commissioner Bonner,
Here.
Commissioner Kalanche, here, and Commissioner Sobroff.
Here, thank you.
Let the record reflect that we have a quorum. Also present, we have the Executive Director, the Chief of Police, the Inspector General, and the City Attorney. Mr. President.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. We welcome everyone attending this morning. All public comment will be heard during item 2 on the agenda. We will dedicate a total of 45 minutes to public comment. Members of the public will have 1 minute per agenda item for a maximum of 2 minutes total. At the request of the speaker will be given 1 additional minute for general public comment for a maximum of 3 minutes total. Members of the public who participate in public comment are reminded that they can speak to any item on the agenda or a matter within the jurisdiction of the Board of Police Commissioners. Public comment is your opportunity to address the board. So you are free to express your opinion on matters before the board and to generally express when you disagree with other opinions expressed. However, directing your comments to other individuals who have spoken or attacking others who have expressed their opinions shall be deemed off topic and your public comment period will be concluded. Members of the public, if you choose to participate in the public comment portion of the agenda, you can participate in the meeting in one of a number of ways that are outlined on the agenda. At this time, we will hear the report of the Chief of Police. Good morning, Chief Moore.
Commission President Briggs, members of the Commission, Mr. City Attorney, Inspector General, good morning. As I do each week, I'm going to talk briefly about our COVID-19 update. I'll talk about significant events, our crime and personnel strength. Relative to the COVID-19 update, this past week, we've essentially remained flat as far as new infection rates as compared to the last week, which is representative of much of what we're seeing across the LA County and the region. Year to date, we now have 3,218 of our personnel that have tested COVID positive. That's 13 additional personnel from the same period last week. Last week's report had an additional 15. The majority continue to be within our sworn ranks with 12 additional COVID positive employees. That leaves us at 2,635 of our sworn personnel that have tested positive for COVID. 583 civilians, which is an increase of 1 additional civilian. We do have two of our personnel that are hospitalized. That number is the same as last week. Both of them are in very serious condition, and we're hopeful and praying for their full recovery. Our work status, as far as those that are remaining at home recovering from COVID versus returning to work, has improved significantly. We now have 80 of our personnel that are at home recovering. Last week, that number was 119. And return to duty now stands at 3,153. That's an additional 60 of our personnel. Our mobile vaccination process continues across the city. We now have administered 1,071 doses or individual doses. That's 268 additional from last week. The next area that I'll address is that over this period of time, this last week, the city gave guidance relative to those that have not identified their vaccination status or have filed an intent to ask for an accommodation, whether it be a religious exemption or a medical exemption. So this morning, we met with all of our commanding officers across the city in a Zoom meeting to lay out the protocols that will begin tomorrow with each of the individuals that have identified an intent to file a medical accommodation or a religious, sincerely held religious belief exemption, as well as those that have the minority that have yet to file and determine, yet to declare their vaccination status, either vaccinated or not. That meeting will take place again tomorrow, beginning on the employee's first work day. We'll be distributing lists today to each of the commands that have those that fit within one of those three categories. And essentially, they'll be given a notice, and the notice will direct them to within 48 hours to, if they've not declared their vaccination status, to do so, and to enter into an agreement that will provide for weekly, twice a week testing, as well as the manner in which that'll be paid for, whether it be out of their own pocket in some instances, or some that'll be provided for by the city. And in the absence of them returning that information within 48 hours, the department, myself, will initiate disciplinary proceedings against the employees, civilian or sworn. Ultimately, our goal is to have a 100% vaccinated, fully vaccinated workforce. For those that have, and at the requirement today, as actually October 20th, was that for everyone to declare their vaccination status, and then up through December 18th, they'll be provided the opportunity to apply for an exemption or an accommodation. So that's the next step. We will begin that notification or that notice process with each of these involved employees. That will be done actually personally by each of the involved commanding officers to ensure that there's clear communication as well as expectation of what our employees' obligations are. It is my hope and belief that the remaining few that have not filed for their exemptions and not declared their vaccination status will do so as required, which will allow us to move forward and not have to initiate personnel actions against them. Our next area I want to talk about is significant events. This last week, I did hear from earlier public comments about questions involving the 27th Street explosion and the long-term recovery effort that is ongoing there. This last week, a policy group made up of myself, Deputy Mayor Jeff Gorell, who's a Deputy Mayor of Public Safety and Homeland Security, as well as Chief Terrazas and the General Manager of Emergency Management Division, Emergency Management Department, Carol Parks, met to discuss long-term implications in the aftermath of this explosion. And they primarily centered around housing. But before I get that, I want to talk just briefly that this long-term recovery group initiative actually consists of 5 separate groups. And each group has representatives from the city family, from county agencies, as well as community-based organizations. Each of the group has a specific role to play in this recovery effort. The first group is a community planning and capacity building group. They aim to get the community involved in their own recovery through organized community events, fairs, and town halls. They help organize infrastructure and beautification projects. The second one is an economic group aimed to provide economic support to both the residences and businesses in the impacted area. This group has provided monetary assistance in the form of Angelino cards to residents and is working to expedite the claims process for both residences and businesses. There's a health and social services group. They aim to provide physical and mental health resources to the community. This group has referred dozens of residents to services to help their recovery effort. And with the help of our private nonprofit partners, such as the All People's Community Center, they're working to provide services like after-school tutoring and college application assistance. The fourth group is housing. This aims to repair the homes that were damaged by the blast, as well as to transition displaced residents from what is currently interim housing into permanent housing. This group has worked to remove the yellow and red tags from many homes and businesses and continue to assist families in, again, finding permanent housing solutions. Lastly is a joint information system. This effort is aimed to align the efforts of all the city public information officers for a one message, many messengers approach to how we communicate. And for the public, I refer you to the www.lacity.org/27th Street. And in there, you'll see a website that provides current information on the recovery efforts and greater details into these groups that I've identified. This policy group that convened last week, its current matter before it is looking at the long-term recovery of people who are currently in interim housing, which is scheduled to end in the coming months. What is the provisions to ensure that each of these residents have a permanent housing situation, whether it is to return to the community which was impacted by the blast or transition into a permanent housing that's outside of that immediate area. The policy group met to support the needs of the planners and the workers within these planning groups to identify that strategic goal and to report back to us, to the group, within the next 30 days as to steps going forward, just to ensure that these communities which have been impacted by this terrible accident, that we do everything possible to ensure an organized and well executed recovery plan. The other item I wish to speak about is we had an officer-involved shooting that occurred this past weekend involving uniform officers in the Van Nuys area of the San Fernando Valley. On Halloween, the 31st of October at approximately 5:20 in the afternoon is when the officer-involved shooting occurred. Earlier that day at approximately 3:25 in the afternoon, Van Nuys patrol officers responded to a radio call of a vandalism suspect in the 6400 block of Matahila Avenue. The suspect there was reported possibly suffering from mental illness and breaking windows and property inside his residence. On arrival, officers attempted to communicate with the individual for approximately 40 minutes from outside his residence and convince him to exit. The individual refused, and after determining that no one else was inside the residence, the officers tactically disengaged and cleared the scene. Hours later, at approximately 5:10 in the afternoon, a second radio call was generated when the same individual was observed outside his residence at that location, armed with 2 knives and vandalizing nearby parked vehicles. Van Nuys patrol officers ultimately encountered the individual on Victory Boulevard, holding a knife in each hand. The officers verbalized with the individual who began walking towards them while armed with one of the knives, resulting in officer-involved shooting and a simultaneous deployment of less lethal munitions. The individual was struck by gunfire and collapsed to the pavement. He was later determined deceased at the scene by Los Angeles Fire Department personnel. No officers or others were injured during this incident, and 2 knives were recovered from the location. Force Investigation Division responded to the scene and investigating it. The individual involved, his name is Michael Delitas Melkin, a male Caucasian, 46 years of age. This represents the 32nd officer-involved shooting this year, and the number versus 26 last year. This officer-involved shooting is the 12th fatal officer-involved shooting this year. That number was 7 last year, and our 4-year average is just over 10. As I remarked last week, we are seeing an increased number of engagements with persons experiencing mental illness, as well as individuals armed with knives. And we will investigate this incident as well as continue to study those instances this year to see what else can be learned relative to the tactics that we're employing in an effort to keep our people safe, as well as to take safely into custody those that are involved in these incidents. Regarding crime, this past week, in transitioning to that next point, we continue to see a 5.8% increase in violent crime. That is primarily driven by an increase in homicides, with 330 homicides this year to date versus 287 last year. That's a 15% increase year over year. That's 43 additional homicides. The other strong factor driving that is in aggravated assaults, which have increased 8.5%, and most recently, a week-over-week increase in a series of robberies. Street robberies, commercial robberies were actually down for the majority part of the year. But in the last 6 weeks, they have now gone into the plus category and have risen. The study that we're working on now is understanding where those street robberies are occurring. As I reported weeks ago, we are seeing an increased number of street robberies in which a firearm is actually present. As an example of that, this last week in the Hollywood area of the city, out of 12 robberies, street robberies, 7 of them involved a firearm. That's a very high proportion. Generally, our street robberies are primarily driven by bodily force instances, force and fear that are not amounting to the presence of firearms. It's very concerning to us. It does speak to the underlying overwhelming presence of firearms that are in our communities and our need to stem the flow of those weapons. I am aware that there will be a presentation before the Commission in the coming weeks relative to our efforts in combating gun violence, and specifically our efforts in gun trafficking and our arrests, and how to influence and deter those crimes from occurring. In regards to overall Part 1 crimes, we stand at a 2.1% increase. In the property crime arena, we're seeing motor vehicle thefts continue to increase week over week. We have a 9.7% increase in motor vehicle thefts. We have a 2% increase in burglary and theft from vehicles. And while we still have reductions in burglaries, so residential and commercial burglaries, as well as personal thefts, we are seeing that those decreases are eroding. So as society continues to open up and more people are continuing to be out and about and enjoying their communities and going out to dinner and engaging in other activities, we are seeing pressures in regards to the property crime. So as I've said weeks earlier, the critical aspect of that is prevention, is neighborhood watch, understanding and working with your neighbors to provide for the safety, to lock it, hide it, keep it, to prevent these type of opportunities from taking advantage of and taking your belongings. Regarding sworn and civilian personnel, we stand essentially with no change from our report last week. 9,473 sworn personnel, 2,670 civilians, 406 reserves, and just over 1,200 cadets. That concludes my remarks, and I'm happy to take any comments or questions.
Thank you, Chief. Do any commissioners have questions for the chief? Mr. Sobroff? No. Commissioner Bonner?
Yes, I do, please. Thank you, if I might. Chief, one question about the 27th Street explosion. You mentioned the 5 working groups that are working on individual elements of it. If you look across that whole process, is there any single individual or organization or entity that's in charge or accountable for any of the outcomes that may or may not be produced?
Well, it's a unified command in a sense of long-term recovery. It's overseen by the general manager of emergency management department. They're charged with the long-term recovery. Housing, however, is a subset. There's individual entities that have that if you chair those individual efforts. So, but overall, General Manager Parks is responsible for coordination and working ultimately at the direction of the mayor for the long-term recovery of this site.
That's she came to one of our meetings recently, I believe, right? And presented.
Yes.
And then also, just at a high level, are you aware, are there any particular, outcomes that are targeted, say, for example, get X number of people back home by X date, or address, X number of claims by X date, or how is it operating from that standpoint in terms of the outcomes they're trying to achieve?
So the primary goal at this point today is to get everyone rehoused who has been displaced, and that is to do so. The current housing, as my understanding, I believe, goes until the end of the year, and as a provision. And so the interim housing, that being an interim step, is how do we transition into permanent housing those that are currently displaced. And Ms. Parks and EMD is tracking the numbers that are involved in that. I don't have those in front of me, but the policy group, even though the police department is not tasked with housing aspect, we did task as a unified effort from the policy group, EMD, working with the housing recovery effort. That function is to pursue and accelerate the permanent placement of every displaced resident, recognizing that we're down to less than 60 days from the interim solution. So how do we ensure that recovery process is seamless and that those families are not disrupted further? That is probably, and that is the most pressing matter before the long-term recovery before us.
Thank you. I have one other question about the crime statistics, and this is a kind of a broad question, really, just about the nature of that conversation, if you will. And can you comment again? I think you have addressed this probably at least once before in our meetings, and I know we've talked about it before. But I'm speaking now to the framework you see across law enforcement that addresses crime statistics year over year, if you will. So we talk a lot about what's happening this year versus last year versus some other point in time. And I understand in situations like we talked about recently, the 12 robberies and homicides, 7 of which involve firearms, that you can kind of track some of those statistics, and from that extrapolate certain trends and things of that nature. But in terms of the view on the comparison, year to year, can you address that? I mean, what is the thinking around why one notes that, hey, you're up 1% here or one down 1% there in any given category of crime?
So thank you. So the reports I give to you today generally are 1 year over, year to date versus the previous year. We actually track this on a number of different levels. This year versus last year, this year versus 2019, recognizing the anomaly that 2020 has posed, and even the first half of 2021. But we also look at week crime by day of the week, and by week over week, and month over month. And then we look more on a long-term basis, crime over the last 5, 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And the idea of looking at each of those snapshots is to understand underlying influences, potential impacts that strategies or conditions within our economy or within our society has had on the instances of crime. We also know and recognize that the way we report crime has changed and evolved over years. For instance, there was a period of time in which we counted violent crime differently, and we saw a huge increase about 15 years ago. And in reality, what shifted was just how we counted violent crimes or aggravated assaults. The same happened with sexual assaults in about 4 years ago, in which the definition of sexual assaults within the Uniform Crime Reporting Standards expanded. So the number of actual crimes did not expand. It's just a process in which we reported them. They were actually reported in a different category. So the different prisms of, if you will, the lenses in which we look at crime is meant to help assist us in understanding how do we lower crime, how do we improve public safety, and how does strategies, or how can we use the change in these numbers to understand the impact of the underlying strategies, what's working, what's not working. And I think that today, what's happened in law enforcement over the last 20 years has been to look at this every day and to look at it over a whole different series of lenses to try, at the end of the day, to improve public safety by recognizing that you have an echo effect. Something that's happening today may or may not show immediately. It may be something that shows results in weeks from now. But we also see that, for instance, as I talk about robberies being up 1.9% year to date, and it is concerning when we see the number of robberies and people being armed is up. When we look over a 2-year period, robberies are still down 15%. So, there's people can say, well, how do you interpret that, Chief? Well, for me, while I recognize that we're still down 15%, double digits from where we were 2 years ago, I'm concerned about the fact that the safety and the sense of safety that we had last year at this time, when there were fewer robberies, our pursuit is to get back to that. And not to normalize this, where we look at and say, and I've heard this said, well, crimes are certainly much lower than they were in the 90s. And so we should not be too disturbed by this recent increase in violence because we're at historic lows. Well, with 43 additional homicide victims this year, 182 additional shooting victims, an increase of 50% in victims shot over a 2-year period, I think that our obligation to the families and to the survivors of this violence is to say, no, we can't look at societal issues over the last 20 or 30 years and be satisfied that this is just a bubble or just an anomaly. We've got to take it on and try to stop and prevent crime from occurring. And it's not just the police department, it's the shared responsibility of all of our societal elements, including the very communities in which we serve.
I appreciate that. I just tell you that and I'm not, what I'm reflecting on again is what I understand to be a construct across law enforcement. So it's, I know some different departments do specific elements of it differently perhaps, but it's just the general idea of being statistic driven. And, a couple of the concerns, one is, it almost suggests that there's some sort of acceptable number of homicides, for example, in any given year. And so, you're happy if it's down a couple percent and, maybe concerned if it's up a couple percent, but it almost, that's one concern, is that at some level, it suggests that there is some acceptable baseline or some acceptable number of homicides or shootings or robberies. And as long as we're within range of where it was 2 years ago or consistent with some prior year, that we're okay. And then in other cases where you see an uptick, one struggles to understand meaning, behind it, which is why I get value out of understanding unique trends. Like that's why I focused on the one relative to we're seeing more guns being used in
Mhm.
more robberies across the city. That's an important thing for people to understand, right? And for us to understand to try to figure out how to deal with that. But the rest of it, it's just that idea of managing, or almost, kind of managing statistics up and down in any given year without the broader context or meaning to it, I think is kind of what I still struggle with. So I don't know, there's no particular point there other than to say that to me, what I would ask also as you report these numbers, from week to week, is if you that anecdote that we were talking about here today about the trend in gun use, I just encourage you to try to extrapolate. There may not be a dozen of those every week. There may be 2 or 3, but I just think those are more helpful, at least to understanding what's really behind some of the numbers and what some of the things that people should be aware of and concerned about is what I find most helpful.
I agree that, and it is challenging to, as you have so many different measures and so many different directions and interests that come from many of those sectors. But to sum this up, shooting violence, as you know, this year and last year are a challenge. And the other most remarkable feature is the sudden shift and dramatic shift in auto thefts. Those are 2 distinct characteristics that measured not just week over week and year over year, but across a decade, are substantial and persistent shifts that cause us significant concerns.
Yeah, absolutely. And then lastly, I'll want to think a little bit more about the OIS numbers, because that's another example where you think you're reporting 32 year to date versus 26 from last year. And that's another area, again, where if you were reporting 26, some of us may take false comfort to say, oh, it's even with last year, or if 25, oh, you're down 1 year. But it's still, a matter of understanding what's going on in those situations that are resulting in the use of deadly force. So anyway, I won't belabor the point, but just to say it's a continuing struggle for context and meaning behind
it. It is actually a fair point, because in 2017 we had 37 officer-involved shootings to this point, so 4 short years ago, and so this is where. But of course, our number is 0. I believe that our effort is to see that we have the ability to overcome these challenging, difficult circumstances, protect our people, protect the public, protect those that are involved that are involved in violence, and not have to resort to the use of deadly force. It is a last resort measure. So it is. I agree with you. And our annual report on use of force, for instance, is meant to provide broader context. And at the same time, it is a process of departments today who historically used to look at crime on a quarterly or semi-annual or annual basis. The FBI still comes out with crime stats that are months and months old, if not years. Is that we look at it more tactically and more day to day in an effort to see what we can do to influence it for the good of the public.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Commissioner Briggs. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bonner. Commissioner Kalanche, do you have any questions for the chief? Thank you, Commissioner Kalanche. Chief Moore, I just want to talk to you for a moment about some of the COVID numbers. I do find it encouraging that the number of officers who are taking advantage of the mobile vaccine appears to be trending upwards. I think that that's good news, and showing that the officers want to comply with the mandate that the city has adopted. With respect to the number of those who have yet to declare their vaccine status, do you have a precise number on that, Chief? You're muted, Chief.
Sorry, it's got to happen once in a meeting. So we're showing today, as of last Friday, we show 1,357 that we do not show a vaccination status, and that is whether they declined to state or failed to participate in the process in the portal earlier. Those are the first individuals that we will be meeting with to provide them a notice of the mandatory vaccination requirements and providing them 48 hours in which to identify that status and enter into an agreement of twice a week testing and other requirements.
Do you know, of that number, the 1357, how many are sworn versus unsworn?
Let me see. The majority are sworn, but I believe I have that number here. Just a moment. No, I will get you that number over the course of this meeting, but I do not have it. The report I have in front of me does not separate that, but I'll get that number for you.
And drilling that down, Chief, do we have particular information as to what divisions that number is comprised of? Is it, south, west, central? Do you have where those numbers are concentrated?
Yes, so we have by each command, we have the numbers that have not filed for an exemption and are not vaccinated. And so, for instance, out of juvenile division, we have 7. Out of security services division, we have 41. Out of the localized commands, for instance, West Valley has 40. The Northeast command has 34. So each of those commands, we have that number. These are, again, reported as of last Friday. Those are the lists that are going out to each of the command officers. And each of those individuals, their first workday, whether it's tomorrow or the next day, recognizing that people work on a rotating shift, will be met with the commanding officer for this provision of providing them the notice requirements. And having them participate in that process that was a result of an agreement or decisions made by the EERC as to how all city employees will have to address this issue of their vaccination status.
Thank you. Turning to the topic that you were just addressing with Commissioner Bonner on the 5.8% increase in violent crimes. Of that percentage, what portion of that represents homicides versus shootings, if you know?
Yeah. So we have 43 additional homicides and 182 additional shooting victims year to date. That's a 15% increase in homicides this year versus last. It's a 47% increase over a 2-year period. On shooting victims, it's a 17.6% increase this year versus last. So 182 additional shooting victims, and it's a 50% increase over a 2-year period. We've had 1,219 shooting victims this year. Again, nearly just 49.9%, twice the number that we did a year ago or 2 years ago. So the bulk of the increase is 1,377 additional violent crimes. The bulk of the violent crime increase is in aggravated assaults. These are people who are assaulted with items, could be a firearm, but it also could be a baseball bat, fist, feet, those type of things, and a 1.9% increase in robberies. The bulk of the increase of nearly 1,400 additional violent crimes is in the arena of aggravated assaults.
Is there any particular division that's driving this increase? By division, I mean portion of our city that's driving this increase where we're seeing the greatest increases, and would it help for us to have more resources in that portion of the city to help bring these numbers down?
So that's our engagement presently each time is to look at the resources as they're deployed across the city of 21 areas and by the 4 geographic bureaus, and understand how those resources are being deployed on localized issues of public safety. The violent crime increase is not uniform across the entire city. By percentage, West Bureau has the largest increase, 13.6%. By pure numbers, though, it would be Central Bureau with an increase of 11.8%. So and actually South Bureau area, which has the greatest, has between 77th Southeast and Southwest and Newton, which is actually part of Central Bureau. That's the largest concentration of violent crime across the city. And South Bureau actually has a 2.1% overall decrease in violent crime year to date.
Thank you, Chief. I have no further questions for the Chief at this time.
Excuse me, Chairman Briggs, may I sneak in one more question for the chief?
Sure,
Just to follow up on your question. This is the chief calling for just a broad brush kind of perspective, but Commissioner Briggs is asking about, the amount of resources. How much, when you're thinking about this issue of the crime trends, how much of it is a function of the amount of available resources versus, say, the allocation and use of available resources? I'm thinking about some of the recent discussions about, the increasing the foot beats and the different configurations and things that are being tried out. So just if you just comment briefly on all things, considered, just generally speaking, how much of the equation is the amount of resources versus allocation?
Well, ultimately, the governing factor is the total amount provided. And then we do a bottom-up staffing. So we have the finite number of officers that are available. And then for uniform deployment for patrol cars, we use a algorithm that looks at the number of calls, the workload that those calls represent on emergency calls, urgent calls, and routine calls. And that results in what's called patrol plan that designates from a finite group of uniform officers what proportion goes to each of the portions of the city to provide for a 7-minute response time for emergency calls. And the goal is a 30 to 40% available time, directed the ability for an officer to control his or her own day by not having tasks from call to call to call. So it's much like it's a queuing factor. They use it in other service industries so that you have a finite group of people. Here's the workload. What proportion of workload does, say, 77th represents of the total versus West LA to reach these service goal levels? That proportion of uniform officers then are placed there. On the investigative side of the house, it's influenced by the number of violent crimes and the types of violent crimes, and then more secondarily by property crimes, because the emphasis is the investigation of homicide, sexual assaults, robberies, and aggravated assaults is the heaviest focus, which results in the deployment of added personnel in those areas that have the highest levels of violent crime. So the entire deployment scheme is an area that it's governed by the total amount you have, and then proportionality based on identifying workload. And then as far as the flexibility or margin of being able to move resources within those, that's where harvesting and robbing Peter to pay Paul come into, where we move resources out of a patrol unit into detectives on loan or into a specialized unit or out of a specialized unit in order to meet the changing or flexing demands within an area.
Well, one, I just learned a lot myself, but I would ask between the chief and maybe even Commissioner Briggs, at some point, I do think it'd be helpful to have a brief presentation just on what you described, the bottom line approach, how the patrol plan comes together, those because at least what I'm trying to prepare for is at some point, when we have the discussion about potentially, hiring more resources, some of that is just to get to the current, baseline, if you will. And then there's this broader picture as we talk about crime, where the conversation sometimes goes, oh, there's more increase in crime, so we need more more police. And there's a lot more to it in that. So I'm trying really to understand so that I'm not myself, I can only speak for myself, so that I'm not subject to that kind of linear thinking, more crime, more police. The question is, to do what and how and what do we expect to get out of that? So it would be helpful to me to have a more, in-depth understanding really about how staffing levels work and how the resources are allocated, so that it can inform those decisions that we'll be making sometime probably, I think in November, there's a budget discussion, and there's probably some others coming up.
Commissioner Kalante, I see your mic. So, Commissioner Bonner, were you finished?
Thank you very much.
Go ahead.
If I can just chime in, I appreciate the conversation and the questions that are being asked and your answers, Chief, to these questions. I think for me, it's thinking about a more holistic approach, which I think which is what I think Commissioner Bonner is kind of alluding to as well, is this linear thinking or moving away from linear thinking. Because I live and work in these communities that are seeing an increase in crime, I think that we need to start thinking about how the city as a whole responds to to crime and how we and how public safety is a driving force for quality of life in these communities. So I think as a commission, I think that we also need to be advocates for these communities and ask for the resources from the city to be invested in these communities, not just policing, but to look at what other resources these communities need in order to address some of the public safety concerns. And that's something that I'm working, I'm working with some of the senior leads in the department to identify those needs and concerns that require investment. That's not just police investment, but investment in other community services and even services from the county, such as mental health and public health resources. But that's something I'd like to move towards as we think about public safety, that there is some sort of discussion and analysis about what other city resources are needed, so that we're not just thinking about what policing services are needed. And I know that's our purview, but I think since not many other folks in the city are thinking about kind of the holistic approach, and public safety is our charge as a commission, I think we need to maybe be the advocates, or not maybe, we should be the advocates for more investment in those community resources in order to improve community safety. So I just had to throw that in because I think it's part of the conversation, that it shouldn't just focus on what police can do, but I think as what the city can do to address those public safety issues and increasing crime that you report on, Chief, every week, but there's no response beyond like what we do here and what you do, Chief, on a day-to-day. That's the only response that we're getting. And I think that the city needs to think about this in a more holistic approach. So just wanted to throw that in as part of the conversation.
Thank you, Commissioner Valencia. We appreciate that. And Chief, I appreciate your time today, as do we all. Thank you for your comprehensive answers. At this time, we're going to turn to the public comment period. Madam Secretary, can you please open us up for public comment? Thank you.
Okay, our first speaker is Gina Viola, followed by Philip Tabby.
Hi, I'd like to speak on Chief's Report 3C and 4B.
Okay, 3 minutes.
I'm really sitting with Commissioner Kalanche's words just now, and I think I'm hoping that everybody heard them loud and clear. What has been clear is a continual divestment from communities and an increase in policing and terrorism from police that have resulted in what we have now, which is lots of crime and little being done about it. And it's not really crime, it's really just a result of that divestment. And even during the Chief's report, Chief, you said, neighborhood watch, neighbors keep each other safe. You said it out loud, and now we have a commissioner saying it as well. It is time to defund the police. It is time to move past this solution to a problem that is getting us nowhere. We're going in circles, round and round again. And we have a city council who is struggling to find resources to fund things that desperately need the resources that you continue to hoard from these communities, and making it impossible for us to get anywhere out of any of the issues that we have. Item 3C, another donation for surveillance tech by LAPD's notorious Metro Division. We have made the demands over and over again. Black Los Angeles have made the demands over and over again that you need to disband Metro. Metro is nefarious. You can't even find them anywhere on the website. This is a division that should be given no more money. This is a division that should not exist. Yet you want to give them GPS devices to track people's cell phones. We just can't keep doing this anymore. The LA Police Foundation donations are purposely opaque. You continue to get funding through these private streams with no oversight by City Council for things to be used in a nefarious manner that come back on Black, brown, and poor people constantly. Today on the City Council's agenda, they have a $3 million line item for signs, metal signs to be put up, posting 4118. so that your people, the LAPD, can go out and continue to criminalize and harass the most vulnerable community members living on our streets who need these resources. They don't need metal signs to tell them why the police are harassing them in their tents night after night after night. We need resources, and we need funding for those resources. And the only place that that can come from is from this department that is so woefully inept at doing anything other than harming people and bringing violence and terror to Black, brown, and poor people. Abolition now is more than just a saying. It is the future. It is what's coming. It's what's next. So thank you, Commissioner Kalanche, for paving the way for those conversations. I hope to hear more of that in this room.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Philip Tabby, followed by caller ending 3146.
Hi there, I'd like to speak on all items, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'd like to bring the website up. The website needs work. The police commission agendas are not on the website. And if so, if somebody could point out where they are, I looked and I couldn't find them. I do believe this commission's under the Brown Act, and if agendas aren't posted for the public under the Brown Act, that means this meeting should just shut down right now. Neighborhood councils have to do it. This commission has a pattern of breaking Brown Act rules. Soberoff cut into public comment about a month ago. Briggs, you cut off a caller for what you considered misinformation. You were wrong. And what about the rules given at the beginning of the meeting? There was a caller, callers shall not attack other callers, but yet you allowed somebody to start with calling other callers white supremacists. This caller was able to continue. That should have been the end of his public comment period. When will this commission take a stand for our officers? You got this vaccine thing coming up. How this board prepared to lose hundreds, if not thousands, of first responders? How many meetings have been held to discuss this? All I hear from this commission are questions on how the officers who refused this experimental jab, how are they going to be punished? You know what? They've held the line. They've protected and they served throughout this entire pandemic. And now you want to take away their job, take away their ability to feed their family. And I know that that's not what this commission decides on, but you're not taking a stand to prevent that from happening. Let's go to the crime stats. We're what, 50% up in homicides? Victim shot, 49% in homicides since 2019. That's a concern. What do you think is going to happen when we lose all these officers? You guys need to stand up for your officers. I think you need to take notes from Sheriff Villanueva. I concede the rest of my time.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have caller ending 3146, followed by caller ending 7742.
Hi, good morning.
Hi, what items would you like to speak on?
Well, I couldn't see the docket, but I want to do public input, the chief's report, and the closed session.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Thanks. October 19th, Bonner was putting the brakes on the COVID protocol for the commission, and everybody looked at you like you were crazy. And I thought that was a good job, even though I know the mayor. I still haven't heard about the Black Lives Matter. They haven't been found out who swatted them. And I actually was thinking that could be China or Russian hacking, which could be CIA or FBI or Homeland Security doing that through the LAPD. So the president says they want to build trust. The trust is gone. They're trying to build trust. But in the minds and hearts of the many people, it's gone, the trust. I don't know how that's going to get in there. We got Afghans coming here on Native American land, and the Oaxacan people were brought up last time. Kalanche had spoken about that and said very important words, that they need economic equity. And that means actually what's going on is that there is inequity. And these Native Americans are being hurt. I've been being told that speaking about Native Americans is out of the jurisdiction of the LAPD, and that's a lie. I've been being cut off about that. If they start to say the LA is not yours, it's ours, they're going to be arrested. The Oaxacan people, it's theirs. Who owes who? These Oaxacan people have been stolen from and put down constantly. I'm part Choctaw. I just seeing what's going on. It is disgusting. Now, on the chief's report, the chief said last time LAPD does not shoot to kill. Well, they killed Gersario Mack. And one of the things I had spoken about is after he was on the ground, there was a female officer that went over and kicked him, right? What was she going to do? Oh, he moved the pinky, boom, 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 again. Oh, my God. What was going to happen, right? Then a few weeks later, they invaded the Mack house as they were grieving and venting. I mean, it's just what they have done. How about Daniel Hernandez? You said you don't shoot to kill. They killed Daniel Hernandez. Okay, the same as Gersario Mack, shot him on the ground. Chief says they don't shoot to kill. Raymond Hernandez, he was shot with 14 bullets for 4.5 seconds by 3 different officers. You said you don't shoot to kill. Eric Rivera was shot 7 bullets for 3 seconds. Africa was on the ground. Now, I know he reached for the gun, but if you watch the video, he fell back down to the ground, was 4 feet away from the officer, who took a step backwards with 3 or other 4 officers around them, and he still shot him and killed him. This Sunday, he shot and killed a guy who was cutting tires, right? So these things are really bad. The chief is getting $1 million. When the military was jumping out of airplanes, and some of these people are dead, their families never got any real compensation, right? And the chief, he never has to jump out of an airplane, and he's getting $1 million, right? There's 2.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have caller ending 7742, followed by Zach Sherwin. Caller 7742, you're on. Okay, we'll come back to 7742. Zach Sherwin.
Yes, I will go ahead and speak to all of the items, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Okay, thanks. I'm really glad that our public safety officials are going to have until December 18th to get vaccinated. You don't want to rush anyone, you know, our police officers who are out there every day in the community interacting with people without their masks on. They need some time to make up their minds and book those vaccine appointments. So December 18th feels like just a time frame that makes a lot of sense given what we've all been through over the past year and a half. Chief, you spoke of eventual disciplinary action for officers who don't comply with the vaccine requirements, and it really specifically calls to mind the murder of Gersario Mack, and how this commission ruled Ryan Lee and Martin Robles' shots out of policy, and how you never took any meaningful disciplinary action, or that I'm aware of any disciplinary action at all, when they killed someone and the commission ruled it out of policy. So, you know, it just really calls to question for me what kind of disciplinary action these officers who don't comply with the vaccine mandate might be facing. You acknowledge that you've heard callers bring up the fireworks in South LA, and to speak to those concerns, you discussed this long-term recovery group with 5 subgroups, one of which is a beautification group. I'm not saying that beautification isn't important, but there are some more pressing and urgent issues involved here, including making those families whole and the deaths that are on your hands, Chief. You're where the buck stops. So maybe some mention or acknowledgement of those would be appropriate here when you're talking about the beautification subcommittee, but mentioning that would require you to take some responsibility for your actions, which you refuse to do. And that URL you told us about is like a digital artifact manifestation of this department's refusal to take meaningful responsibility for its actions. Quote, "Resiliency does not occur overnight. This operation will begin reshaping perspectives and physical landscapes. I mean, the copy on the website just could not be skirting the issue more broadly. Through this shared experience, residents and service providers alike are creating a new normal in the wake of disaster. What shines through is your failure to acknowledge that this was a disaster that was your fault. You are a piece of work, Chief Moore. No one is going to forget that you said that that George Floyd's death is on the hands of protesters as much as the officers who killed him. This commission exists to provide a veneer of legitimacy, but it's really hard to feel that you're doing anything meaningful. Where's Steve Soberoff right now? I yield the rest of my time.
Okay, thank you. And we'll go back to caller ending 7742, followed by caller ending 5521.
Good morning. I'd like to speak on all items, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Okay. This virus isn't going anywhere anytime soon, despite the vaccination and boosters. At best, those who get the jab may have a milder illness. Many officers have acquired immunity by working and putting themselves at risk during the last year and a half, while little was known about COVID. Now, the plan is to discard some of those officers like trash, ruin their careers, and plunge them into poverty. You plan to take this action while our crime stats go through the roof? Many have strong religious and medical moral objections to this vaccination. The Tuskegee experiments are still fresh in people's minds. All of these vaccines are approved only under emergency use authorization per the CDC, August 2021. You can find it on their website. Firing officers who have concern over taking the jab is coercion and reminiscent of the Nuremberg era. The vaccines are still experimental. None of us should be at our governors, none of us should be government subjects or treated as slaves under government control, holding our individual health or livelihood hostage unless we partake in this experiment. You have not provided compensation for officers injured by the vaccination. My question is, will you? Have you considered alternatives for treatment that prevent serious illness or testing weekly? California Government Code 12926 protects one's religious liberty and practice, including the ability to not participate in practices that violate one's sincerely held religious beliefs. Don't mock or belittle those or question their integrity. How dare you? Coercing or forcing any person to take such vaccines is a violation of your oath of office, your obligation to protect our civil rights, and will strip you of any and all immunity. The data and science now shows the vaccination is not all that it was cracked up to be. It is irresponsible at this point to fire our police and staff while the vaccinated can still get and pass the virus. Public safety is at great risk, not by the unvaxxed, but by the reduction of our police force. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have caller ending 5521, followed by Betty Lay. Caller 5521.
Hello. Yes, I'm here.
Hi, what items would you like to speak on?
1, 2, and 3.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Bill Watkins. It's been a long time. Used to come to the meetings a lot. I'm glad the meetings are still going through this strange time. First, I wanted to just say the agenda came through a little late on the website today. Someone probably already knows that, but eventually it did come. But it was a little late, so I didn't know what was going on for a little while. But thanks for putting it on now. It was on Twitter, but I can't read it from Twitter, so it's too small. Anyways, Thanks for that. I sort of second the last caller a little bit. I just wanted to bring up health a little bit, Chief. Hi, Chief, and everybody there. I miss you guys in some ways. I've been living in Mexico for 2 years, just escaped the rush and moved to the country and wrote a book. I'm back, and I see something like the last caller said, we have rights, and this concept of health is one to look into worldwide, and it's very personal, health. I have one. You guys have one. I have a history, and you guys have a history. No government knows my history, my health history. No government will. It's impossible to legislate the way we're doing, from the mayor and all the way to the president of the United States. It's an insanity to think that we're all on the same page health-wise. It's like saying we're going to be on the same page religion-wise. It's the same thing. It's very personal. In fact, my health is related to my religion and my spiritual views. It just is. Anyways, so that's something that we need to sort out everywhere, and this commission too is realizing that it's a personal thing. Also, third, I guess I wanted to just echo what some of mentioned, a caller last week mentioned, of all things, about Turtle Island and bringing up this invasion, this European invasion, and this civilization we've put down here. We've put down this concrete, asphalt, helicopters, which a lot of people there know I don't like, and trying to enforce this all with lethal weapons. I spoke with the LAPD officer at Hollenbeck Division, very convincing and neat guy, nice spirit, a lead officer, who almost convinced me that lethal force was okay. And in this environment, it almost seems okay to kill some people. It's pretty crazy. And I just wanted to just bring up, I like to think I live in Otsunya, the place of the roses in Northeast here, and not Los Angeles, which was coined from a violent invasion, guns and Bibles, guns and Bibles. And we're still suffering. I would love to see you all outside of your suits, taking less money, and join me cleaning up the streets. There is no homeless problem. The problem's not with the poor. It's with the people at the top not getting out of their SUVs and cleaning up trash. We have a filth problem. I love you guys. Stay up and stay with these electronic meetings. It's all good. Love. Peace.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Betty Lay, followed by T.
Can you hear me?
Hi, yes, what items would you like to speak on?
I'd like to speak on the chief's report, public comment, and a few of the agenda items, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Okay, first off, I always start with, I support Chief Moore. I support all of LAPD, law enforcement, rescue enforcement, rescue first responders. I feel that if we don't get everybody vaccinated, what's going to happen? Where are the first responders going to be? They're going to be fired, and then we're in trouble. I would love to see everybody vaccinated, but everybody, all human race has a right to decide what they want to put in their body. It should not be government mandated, please. Also, for agenda items, all those on the agenda, I support for the donations and the grants. And I believe that it's important that we get those for the different items listed on the agenda, past items, current items. Please, I need everybody to understand how important it is not to mandate these vaccinations. I'm vaccinated, I'm proud of it. It would be nice if everybody was, but everybody has a right, like I said, to put what they want in their body. It should not be government run. Please, everybody stay safe, everybody stay healthy. I yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have T, followed by Jason R.
Hello,
Hi, what items would you like to speak on?
all of them, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
First off, I want to honor we're on stolen land. Prayers, power, and strength to all the families impacted by police violence. Commissioner Calamanchi said the first sensible thing I've heard any commissioner say, because y'all just ask softball questions. It's not even impactful in any kind of way or any meaning. And the most important thing she said is that we need resources. Police do not prevent crime. Resources do. Our community, our Black and brown communities need resources, but your budget, the police budget, keeps up eating 54% of the general fund. And then on all these agenda items, you're just asking for more money coming from other sources of funding, on top of what you get from the city funding our money. So you have one commissioner with some sense saying that, cops don't prevent crime. We need resources. We need money in our community. We need housing. We need mental health. How many people are y'all going to shoot and kill for mental health issues? You killed someone again? 32 people y'all killed this year alone. This is a disgrace because of mental health issues. What is a knife and a gun? You bring a knife and a gun to a fight, which one's going to win? Come on. Y'all don't know how to de-escalate? We don't need cops showing up for mental health crises. We need real mental health workers that know what they're doing, that know how to de-escalate and talk to folks. You're not taking anybody into custody. You're just killing them, right? And what Gershario Mack, out of policy, his death is found out of policy. Officers are getting fired for, not taking the vaccine or whatnot, and they should or whatever. But what about officers getting fired for not, for murdering our folks? Ryan Lee is still on the job, and y'all want to point him to one of the commission boards that y'all had, the diversity, equity, or whatever. He should be fired and prosecuted for murder. What, are you kidding me? The explosion in South LA, you guys draft up all these boards. 4 months later, these people still don't have housing or displaced. This is unacceptable. And you still refuse, Chief Moore, to mention Ozzie Hutchinson and Ramon Reyes, that y'all were murdered in those streets. You're not taking any accountability. This commission it's just like a bad reality TV show that I got to wake up. Every Tuesday to. It's actually a nightmare, especially for the families impacted that y'all kill. No accountability. Where's the accountability for all the folks you've murdered on our streets? We need to defund the police, fund our communities, and fire Chief Moore.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Jason R., followed by Richie.
Hello?
Hi, what items would you like to speak
All
on?
of them, Becky.
Okay, 3 minutes.
All right, so Moore sits around eating red giraffes, clam chowder, and rooting for the racist Braves while his department continues to terrorize, brutalize, and put our communities in danger. Moore, I see you got some glasses on today. Is that a new PR move to make you look and sound less stupid? Guess what? Won't work. So the LAPD murdered yet another person on Halloween, the 12th person murdered by y'all this year, the 32nd shooting of 2021. We know that the LAPD has shot more folks experiencing a mental health crisis this year than in 2020 and in 2019. In fact, that number is doubled compared to 2019. And while the man that was murdered on Halloween was white, we should remember that the people shot and murdered in a mental health crisis are mostly people of color. And we see across the spectrum how LAPD doesn't value Black and brown lives. Now onto the vaccine mandate. The public is hoodwinked into believing that these pigs put their lives on the line each and every day to quote unquote protect and serve us, but now are being exposed since they don't want to take a vaccine. Musty Mike, how many officers have died as a result of taking the vaccine? None, because we know the LAPPL would have blasted that shit everywhere. How many have died as a result of COVID? Last count, I believe, was 12. So let's see here. So now there wouldn't be that big of an issue with vaccination if LAPD officers had been testing weekly and, wearing masks. But neither of those things happen. There are so many people that have got COVID as a result of police interactions, whether in custody, while being searched, or through unsolicited human-to-pig communication. The number of people who have been killed by COVID as a result of these pigs not wearing masks must be in the hundreds by now. All more reasons to fire Chief Moore. The fact that this commission determined that it'll be at least another month before in-person meetings begin The fact that y'all can state that COVID-19 daily cases and community transmission remain high. The fact that y'all say that COVID-19 presents imminent risk to the health and safety of attendees, but somehow haven't asked for any type of reporting on the lack of mask wearing by LAPD officers, or if any officer has been disciplined as a result of not wearing a mask, is ridiculous. All right. Briggs, let's start with how many complaints have been made against officers. Let's get a report on the lack of discipline put into place by this failed chief. The public deserves to know. Your failure to do anything in this regard shows the public that you could care less about the COVID safety protocols as you continue to allow these super spreaders to infect our communities most vulnerable. You can't even keep them accountable for wearing masks during a global pandemic. It's truly pathetic. Also, I find it ironic that the LAPD Rampart tweeted out safety guidelines for Halloween instructing folks to carry flashlights, but at night protests, LAPD has been pushing for the banning of flashlights since Echo Park Lake to remove the ability for nonviolent protesters to have them for their own safety. Briggs, I have 1 minute of general public comment to address items that are not on the agenda and part of the purview of this commission. Last week, Decker cut me off when I called out Soboroff for asking for the home address of an LAPD critic on Twitter. So why is it that she felt to cut my comment short when addressing the commissioner's behavior? It seems that my comments are always cut short. Fuck y'all.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Richie, followed by Oscar Portillo.
Hi, yes, all available items, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Yes, it's Richie Serdenko from the People's City Council. Chief Moore, you still refuse to say the names of the two people that LAPD killed in South Central, Ozzie Hutchins and Ramon Reyes. And I don't really understand why LAPD is involved with the policy team. What experience does LAPD have in policy other than, shooting and killing someone and the shooting being out of policy, like Tony McBride, the daughter of Jamie McBride, the head of the LAPPL, who has shot 5 people. Of course, it's funny that Chief Moore was our number for officer involved shootings is 0. When does that ever happen, bro? Literally. You don't feel like an asshole saying that out loud, that you think that, the LAPD number for officer involved shootings is 0? That's never happened. Not even close. Not even close. So you're not even realistic, bro. You have no fucking clue. You just go up there and say fucking shit. The shit just pouring out of your mouth, doesn't mean anything. It's kind of ridiculous, honestly. 32 people, you guys keep shooting people in mental health crises. Chief Moore, honestly, I think you admit that, LAPD shouldn't be involved with mental health services, right? And shouldn't be mental health calls. You know what, dude? I have to fucking offer up some funding so we can get some professionals in there that don't have fucking guns and kill people because they don't know how to fucking respond other than fucking shooting people. Seriously. And then you try to compare to 34 from a few years ago. You guys that's not good anyways. It's not good anyways. It's just awful, man. I'm getting just distracted by how much fucking bullshit Chief Moore has done, honestly. What's up with Dr. Molina? You guys swatting her house twice. Well, you guys aren't releasing the evidence of the 2 calls. Is there any evidence? Probably not. I honestly, item 3C, another donation for surveillance for LAPD's notorious Metro Division, GPS devices to track people's cell phones. Honestly, does Metro Division need this? They're quite honestly the worst. And this police commission, Kalanche, you were very close to making an amazing point. You understand that the need to invest in those other services and what communities are calling for, that's defunding the police, right? The budget is a finite thing. The budget is a number. We need to take money.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Oscar Portillo, followed by Adam and Adeline.
Yes, hi, can you guys hear me?
Hi, yes. What items would you like to speak on?
I'd like to speak on all items, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Okay, so On behalf of the people of Los Angeles, in particular our low-income communities who depend on our officers for safety and security, what exactly is the plan when we lose all these officers who refuse to get vaccinated? It is rumored that officials have threatened to lay off thousands of officers who refuse the jab. Currently, there are 9,473 officers, and according to various news outlets, about 40% of those officers have not gotten the vaccine. If doctors and nurses are refusing the vaccine, what the hell does that tell you? So you're telling me if true, because I don't know who to believe anymore, because everything, especially crime, is being swept under the rug so people don't focus on the real issues and see that our streets are deteriorating and falling to these criminals. The city is prepared to let 40% of the LAPD force, roughly around 5,689 officers, walk off the job. With violent crime up in every major category like homicides and shootings with no end in sight because at the moment no one is being arrested, is this really a good idea to cut the police force in half? The criminals are winning. They are simply being put in handcuffs, taken to the police station in what is being described as a scare tactic, given a citation at the station, then released only to go recommit again. If you have any beefs to settle, do it now because you will not get arrested. If you beat the crap out of your wife or your child, you will get a citation that is equivalent of driving without a seatbelt. So again, I ask you, on behalf of the low-income communities who depend on the safety and security of these officers, what exactly is the plan? Because at the moment, whatever you are doing is not working, but in fact is getting worse. Does the city have a good, strong plan to provide adequate security for these people? People were finally getting the hint during the riots of 2020 that the city council does not give a crap about us. Then they wonder why gun shops were selling out of guns daily with lines going around the damn block. People were finally getting the hint that sometimes you can't even depend on the police due to the fact we have a weak council, we have a weak mayor, and we have a weak police chief who rather put the public in hopelessness and despair over these vaccine mandates that have become politicized. It's sad that some police officers respect Sheriff Villanueva more than they do their own police chief because the sheriff has been the only one out of all these cowards to take a stand and defend his deputies and the community to the fullest. This is not right what is happening. Just last year, we hated officers, doctors, and nurses as heroes. Now we are ostracizing them, making it hard for them to do their jobs and be able to provide for their families and threaten them with termination if they don't comply with these forced mandates. This is not 1940s Germany. This is unconstitutional and it is wrong. We are asking the commission and the chief to do the right thing. Look out for the people, not the cowards on the city council. I yield my time.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Adam and Adeline, followed by Steve Rogers.
Hello.
Hi, what items would you like to speak on?
Sorry, this is Adam Smith. I was saved from my parent-teacher conference, but I'm gonna do public comment, chief's report, and 4C.
Okay, 3 minutes.
I hope you sleep well at night. I hope you don't sleep well at all. I don't see how you could.
This is off topic.
You don't live your life like a decent human should.
Madam Secretary, please go to the next
I
speaker.
hope your money.
Okay, next we have Steve Rogers, followed by Ian Jamison.
Good morning.
Hi, what items would you like to speak on?
All items, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
I'd like to start off by saying that this is the United States of America, a constitutional republic. All lives matter. I'm pro-community. I'm pro-police. Now, the chief started off with his COVID Wuhan virus report. So everything I'm going to say pretty much is going to be related to that until the end. Let me remind everyone here that I read off the law last week into the record, health and safety codes, civil codes, and Title VII. So you can refer back to that if you need to be refreshed on that. But this is also regarding the law. Discrimination. An employer must accommodate an employee's religious beliefs unless the employer can prove doing so will result in undue hardship. That's a must accommodate. Proof of hardship. Providing proof of hardship is the responsibility of the entity enforcing the mandates. Consent. And we heard about testing being done 2 times in a pay period or 2 times a week, whatever it is to put an undue burden on the officers. regarding that. Workplace-based testing should not be conducted without the employee's informed consent. Informed consent requires disclosure, understanding, and free choice, and is necessary for an employee to act independently and make choices according to their values, goals, and preferences. And a reference for that is CDC, January 21st, 2021. The Fourth Amendment privacy protects the right of the people to be secure in their persons. Does that not include not being coerced to take an injection? So I'm making the point that if you want to be vaccinated, that's up to you. You're sovereign over your own body for religious reasons, constitutional, and medical reasons. Now, the chief said his goal is a 100% vaccinated workforce. No size fits all, Chief. No size fits all. There are people that should not be getting the vaccine for medical reasons. I think that needs to be acknowledged. For religious reasons, that needs to be acknowledged. So why should your goal be a 100% vaccinated workforce? I don't think that's reasonable. I don't think that's appropriate. The twice-a-week testing. There's a company called Bluestone. Look it up. There seems to be some perhaps corruption involved. Follow the money. Go where the evidence takes you. And we still need an update on the St. Peter's Catholic Italian Church, Chief. It's a hate crime. There's been a spate of hate crimes across the country. Let's look into it. Let's get an update.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Ian Jamison, followed by caller ending 4952.
Madam Secretary, caller 4952 will be the last speaker today.
Okay. Ian, you're on. Ian, okay. We'll come back to Ian. Caller 4952.
Yeah, hi, I'd like to speak to all of them.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Hi, this is T. Guerra. I'm with the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition, and I'm calling to reject the grant under item 4C and also to raise our demand to defund the police. So every year, the city of LA gives over half of the city's unrestricted funds to LAPD, which is currently to the tune of $3.2 billion, over $3.2 billion, and that budget has increased by 48% in the last 7 years, and it has increased this year as well by 41 million. And that doesn't even take into account other sources of funding for LAPD. In addition to the budget, cops also get funding from the budgets of other departments like HACLA, and they also get money from private donors who believe in punitive and carceral responses to poverty. And they get money also through grants, some of which are on the agenda today, so that even during a global pandemic and global uprising against the police, which is ongoing, and even as houselessness increases in LA, over $3 billion of the city's budget goes to LAPD, plus additional money from grants from the government. And all of this continues even as LAPD continues to kill people who are in crisis. And despite this, the LAPD, as we hear, still spins the narrative about its own budget to make it seem as though its budget was significantly reduced in 2020, when actually it was reduced by just a tiny fraction, which is not what we are demanding. And when you account for the money that LAPD additionally receives from grants and from donors, we actually have no way of knowing how much LAPD actually receives year to year in any year. And that lack of transparency is intentional, so that LAPD can spin lies about how little money it has and how deeply impacted it has been by calls to defund the police. When fuck you, the budget for 2021 increased again, and LAPD continues to also receive grant money and donations for training, like this VR de-escalation camp that will not lead to better outcomes for LA residents, especially those residents who are already in crisis and who would benefit more from funding going to supportive and life-affirming programs and services. LAPD uses tactics to hide what the budget actually is. It uses fear mongering to make it seem like we are dependent on police when it is clear that police do not keep us safe and police do not define or understand community safety. We also reject the definitions by LAPD and this board in even talking about crime and violence, because this is a board where a cop can shoot someone in the back who is running away and they think that's fine and that that is not violence, or shoot someone who is already on the ground, or murder a person who is having a mental health crisis and say that's fine, that that keeps happening. That is not okay that that keeps happening. And then you want to sit here and talk about what are your measures of crime and violence and what are your definitions and how that is shifting up or down based on your records and your definitions. We do not subscribe to these definitions. We demand a defunding of LAPD and an investment in services and support for communities that is life-affirming, not life-threatening. We reject this grant, defund the police, dismantle this commission.
Okay, thank you. We're going to go back to Ian Jamison. Ian?
Hello, hi, can you hear me?
Hi, yes. What items would you like to speak on?
Yes, could I speak on all items, please?
Yes, 3 minutes.
Hi, my name's Ian Jamison. I am with LA Leftists Against Mandates. I'd like to start out by saying that, well, I have severe issues with Sheriff Villanueva's leadership of LASD, and in particular, his failure to provide the Civilian Oversight Commission with subpoena power and the documents to which they were legally entitled. I nonetheless applaud Sheriff Villanueva for defying the LA County Board of Supervisors' totalitarian, murderous vaccine mandates, and for standing up for the constitutional rights of his deputies. And I am very disappointed that Chief Moore has failed to stand up for the constitutional rights of his officers. All of these vaccines are emergency use. Under federal law, it is illegal to mandate anything under emergency use authorization. Americans must be guaranteed the right to refuse products under EUA. I would also point out that a meta-analysis of the studies on natural immunity versus vaccines released by the Brownstone Institute on October 19th reveal that 81 studies show natural immunity is either as good as or superior to vaccine-induced immunity. With regard to masks, according to the Mayo Clinic, the pore size of those N95 masks is 1,000 times wider than the COVID-19 virus. The masks are doing absolutely nothing to stop transmission. And I call on Chief Michael Moore to stand with his officers, stand with the pilots, the teachers, the firefighters, the dock workers, everybody who is rising up against this horrific government overreach. And finally, Chief Moore, I would just point out to you, I have been saying for years that given that 97.5% of American police officers killed in the line of duty are killed by guns, overwhelmingly handguns, it makes no sense to allow lethal force on people who do not have a gun. This is supported by the research of Franklin Zimring of Berkeley University. This is supported by the research of Lawrence Sherman, who is with the Cambridge Institute of Criminology. You have academic experts all over the world calling for an end to this horrific practice in the United States of shooting people who do not have a gun. And had you instituted those reforms, we would be seeing far fewer horrific killings of civilians, unnecessary killings of civilians. This is your fault. You are screwing up so horrifically. And I just want to conclude by saying we all need to stand up against this government overreach while we still have a democracy. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. That is the end of the public comment. At this time, we will now turn to item 3 on the agenda, findings to continue to teleconference meeting pursuant to AB 361. The statement of the findings is the COVID state of emergency remains active. State or local officials have imposed or recommended measures to promote social distancing. Consistent with findings made by the City Council on October 6, 2021, COVID-19 pandemic remains a significant challenge in the city of Los Angeles, particularly in light of the highly contagious Delta variant. COVID-19 daily cases and community transmission remain high, and according to health experts, are likely to increase during the coming weeks because of respiratory viruses spread more easily in the fall and winter months. I move that the Commission determined in accordance with AB 361 that this legislative body has considered the circumstances of the state of emergency, and the state of emergency continues to present imminent risk to health or safety of attendees, and continues to directly impact the ability of the board members to meet safely in person. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Motion carries. Thank you. This time we'll turn to item 4 on the agenda, the consent agenda items. Do any commissioners have any questions?
No, sir.
Not seeing any, I move that we adopt items 4A, B, C, and D. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. We next turn to item 5 on the regular agenda items. First up is the department's verbal presentation and discussion by the Harbor Community Police Station Commanding Officer and Civilian Co-Chair relevant to the activities of the Harbor Division Community Police Advisory Board. Captain J. Mastic is present. Captain, I see that you are coming on board.
Let me take it from the top.
Your camera is not on though, Captain.
There we go.
There we go. Good morning, Captain, and good morning, Ms. Sutton.
Good morning. And thank you to the commission and Mr. Teague for inviting us to speak about the Harbor Area Community Police Advisory Board, we refer to as CPAB. I'm Captain Jay Mastic. I'm the commanding officer of Harbor Area, and I also serve as the CPAB co-chair along with Mona Sutton. Harbor Area consists of 28 square miles. It includes the communities of San Pedro, Wilmington, Harbor Gateway, Harbor City, and Terminal Island. I want to thank our community stakeholders and leaders. It's through our longstanding partnership that we've transformed the way Harbor Area and our communities work to address public safety issues. The Harbor CPAB has evolved over many years through the efforts of community stakeholders like Monin, as well as others. Our collaboration is why we can do the work that makes our community safer. The current structure of Harbor CPAB began in 2006, about 15 years ago, under the leadership of Mona, who will be speaking shortly, as well as then Captain Joanne McNamara, who is now retired. Our CPAB has tackled a lot of critical public safety issues to include developing a school safety collaborative, as well as advocating to ensure that our Harbor Area Jail was reopened. This CPAB has been and continues to be a positive force for change. One of the key priorities for Harbor CPAB has been to expand the executive CPAB panel to reflect the diverse community that we serve. We did this by recruiting 2 representatives from Wilmington, one in East Wilmington, one in West Wilmington, and one representative from the Harbor Gateway. Our newest members are Sarah Ortega and Amber Chavara, who represent Wilmington, and Veronica Alcaraz, who represents the Harbor Gateway. Our executive CPAB, which consists of 10 members, also includes Mona Sutton, who will speak shortly, James Baeza, Mary Ellen Barnes, Linda Nuttall, Debbie Rouser, who are San Pedro residents. We also have Tom Houston and Olive Reed, who are in Harbor City. Our general CPAB meetings are open to everyone and anyone who is willing to be a partner to us and address public safety concerns for our area. We do our best to include as many community voices as possible in these meetings. We hold them once a month. With that, I'd like to include our incredible CPAB co-chair, Mona Sutton. She's a local business leader, a member of the San Pedro Chamber of Commerce, and she's also a member of the CPAB committee that rewrote our current bylaws and a founding member of the Bridge Cities Alliance. Please welcome Mona Sutton.
Good morning, everybody. I'm very, very excited to be here this morning. Commissioners and Chief Moore, it's really a pleasure to be here, even though we're here on Zoom. Most of the time when I have seen you has been in person, in your neck of the woods, to speak before you to get all kinds of stuff done. So good morning. And I'm in a unique position, having been in this position for so many years, to speak on the rich and interesting story and history of CPAB. And, I would be remiss if I didn't, take this time to really talk about how important the partnership of the Los Angeles Police Department has been, and their willingness to partner in the community has been to the harbor area and all corners of it. So, like Captain Mastic said, our current harbor CPAB really took its form about 15 years ago. And I have been on the team from the beginning. And really part of the story of how Harbor CPAB became a real powerhouse and such a success story is really a fascinating one to me on, on how this all, the matrix of how it's all worked and come together. And it's really a two-parter, beginning when indeed a captain, Joan McNamara, arrived at Harbor Division. And this captain turned out for not just for our division, but for the community to be that captain, that person that really wanted to make real inroads of change and really leave her special mark on a command and a really diverse community that was really ripe for a lot of change. And indeed, she did leave her mark before she left and got promoted. So it turns out that Captain McNamara was indeed a change agent. On the LAPD side, she really created and brought together the idea of a real community partnership style of policing forward. And frankly, long before community partnerships really were a thing, and seemingly really ever in fashion, from my point of view, in my experience. But with this, she brought in what she did was she brought in a fresh new team of handpicked officers to be her change team. And these officers were one of devoted, like-minded people motivated to carry out this mission of hers of building a partnership and a collaboration with the community for our success. One of the key point people that that really helped bring another member of the team forward was Deputy Chief Sharon Papa. She brought the sergeant in charge, a Sergeant Catherine Plows, to our area Crow office. This sergeant was tasked with rebuilding the team of our SLOs, a team that would really be willing to work harder, smarter, and way outside any normal box that they really ever dreamed of. McNamara sent her SLO team after this out into our community to go door to door. And this was really before the real advent of social media platforms, that many years back. The SLOs really dug into putting out flyers, knocking on doors, going to businesses, going into, and San Pedro has a very large high school and middle school that serves 4,800 youth. That's really in the heart of our business district and the corridor. And frankly, this idea that she had to send the team out, it was a plan that really worked because so many in our community, the harbor community is really, it's a port-centric town. It's coined, I'm not originally from San Pedro, I've been here about 30 years now with my business as well as being a resident. But it's interesting, it's coined where the ghetto meets the sea. Who would know? But with that, there really were a lot of very frustrating, real quality of life issues and frustrations, and not a lot of avenues at all to really vent public safety concerns, let alone for community members and business owners or anybody really to come together to create paths to solutions that were really plaguing all of the harbor area, not just San Pedro. Also the four corners of our harbor area, we have five generations of gangs that are super prevalent in the Gateway, in Wilmington, and in San Pedro. So what we were all seeing was a lot of prevalence of street crime, tagging, as well as as always, a lot of homelessness. And really, the other problem that we had faced at that time was we really have the largest amount of a variety of all sorts of halfway houses, the largest per capita in all of Southern California. There was really at that time lots going wrong in our little seaside town. But conversely, our town has lots of amazingly good people that really wanted and deserved an excellent quality of life, wanted clean and safe streets. So, as a story that, as I'll tell you, it's really was perfect timing for this new captain to come in with an idea to help make change in our community, a community that was really weary and really sick of everything. So for the second part of how CPAB took shape, McNamara really outreached and created a plan with finding new trusted voices in our community, people like me and some others that were willing really to make a commitment to dig in to work on solutions. So, as this road was created, and indeed create is what we ended up doing, it's really been a trail that we've blazed with, an LAPD police captain deciding to trust civilian relationships where none really existed before to that level. Honestly, I really never dreamed of what has been accomplished or what could be accomplished as a result of this level of collaboration. The CPAB, this collaboration really created a platform to give a small team a real partnership to advise and obviously to direct and ultimately really to find our voice, not only with the Los Angeles Police Department, but with all levels of the city of LA in government. And what we ended up doing is we really built a team and outreached a team of doers that wanted to help make real changes. And when you put strong, like-minded people together, doors, we have cracked doors open and we've broken a lot of barriers with our partnerships. Our current CPAB has evolved into really and serves as the ultimate go-to action group in the harbor area in being really a resource and a liaison, not just to the division, but we also, as a CPAB, serve to empower stakeholders from San Pedro, Wilmington, and Harbor City and the Gateway. And we have really pushed for everybody to come forward to participate, seek solutions, ask any question, and ultimately gain knowledge and seek resolution to public safety and everybody's quality of life concerns in their areas. And I'm happy to say that, before COVID, our monthly in-person meetings regularly at the station boasted always 50 to 60 or more. And honestly, COVID Zoom and our promotion of it, let alone the burning desire for, our folks in the harbor area to want to be heard and participate. Zoom has really increased our participation regularly, monthly, from 70 to 80 plus. And I'm really proud of that. CPAB's model, certainly of where we have taken it in the harbor area, has been a lot of hard work on both sides. We meet once a month, every third Thursday, and as Captain Mastic said, our board consists of about a dozen of really, really key active community members that truly represent the heart of each of the districts that they live in. A lot of our members, we were able to attract some really great people because of the weariness of the Brown acted neighborhood council meetings. And, many of us are former neighborhood council presidents or former members of certain committees that have come forward that, that want to do great work and want to work really hard. So in that, we have really built CPAB as the platform in the harbor area where some of the best stakeholder minds want to come and work and really this cutting edge partnership between Los Angeles Police Department and, people like me and the rest of us. We have tackled over, when I look at the body of all the years from where we started in this unique partnership to where we are to this moment, I think of our more current history of COVID and the shutdown, and then, the George Floyd crisis and the riots in Los Angeles. And to give you an example, when the riots happened in Los Angeles in late May, a week later, this is the power of CPAB, the following weekend on June 6th, in that terrible week of turmoil, CPAB Harbor Division, our local chamber of commerce that we partner with strongly, came together with CD15 and put together a unity rally that started at the police station and ended up with over 500 people showed up from our community, as well as all camps. We also attracted the South Bay chapter of the NAACP showed up, and I want to say thank you, Chief Moore. You were there, Chief Regina Scott, and everybody showed up, along with a lot of the Black Lives Matters folks. And we marched together, community outreach, CPAB outreach, to bring dozens of white roses for all of us to hold. We really kind of put on a safety exhibition of masks and had hand sanitizer and waters. And we marched from all of us together from the police station. And who's ever heard of this? LAPD leading a unity rally with the community. I'm so proud of that, because we marched all the way to our city hall in San Pedro in unity, and that's how Harbor CPAB reacted to the disparity of what's going on. And moving forward with past that and the reimagining, I want to speak just a little bit with the reimagining of the rest of the year of what's happened to the budget and LAPD and everything that's happened. I'm really thrilled to report that, our command staff, we've had an amazing captain come to us and be Captain Mastic, my partner, and be promoted, as well as really large shoes to fill in our position of the sergeant in charge that leads our team of SLOs. Harbor, through Harbor CPAB, we really learned very early that what we wanted from our partnership in the Los Angeles Police Department at Harbor was we wanted to set the bar higher for our standard of policing and for what that really meant. So with that, we have an amazing sergeant that stepped into the shoes and that has seamlessly moved forward, even in an acting position, to lead our team of SLOs directly on the path that we've laid out from CPAB. Our SLOs pay attention to all the public safety concerns that are brought forth by our CPAB board members as well as our community members. And as we've moved forward, I want to tell you a little bit about, through how we've surged is, CPAB a long time ago decided that, once the advent of social media began, we really created an outreach team. And we did this by creating social media platforms. We have over 20 neighborhood watch platforms with tens of thousands of folks that are on them. And the exciting thing is that, we have everybody paying attention. We use the social media platforms to tout LAPD success, to disseminate information. And also we use it to build trust in each other. And we have created a stronger one San Pedro, one Harbor area community, not just by social media outreach, but by great folks from our team, as well as our community team that man these social media sites that disseminate information for public safety and send messages out. and beyond. And as Captain Mastic said, with the early creation of CPAB, some of the best of the collaboration, really started out with local safety. And that meant that was what that looked like was our school safety collaborative. And it's so unique, and it was actually transferred over into the other areas of our division. It's sort of a long story, but it's so amazing of what's been done in the harbor area with the collaboration. I just can't stand it, but to want to tell you just about everything that we've ever done, but I won't, because it's too long of a story. But in this, the CPAB platform and the School Safety Collaborative, there is no agency that wasn't thoughtfully brought to a table to affect change in the middle of a business district that was wrought with 50 and 60 kids fighting, from our Rancho San Pedro gang and Black on Brown issues. And it was really a trying time for us. And with the collaboration, the nonprofits that came forward were Toberman and Boys and Girls Club. We had all the administrators of the school, and we were all brought to a table to sit down, me as a community member and others, to hash out and really tackle these problems and get to the root of them. And off we went. But then in the later time, the collaboration has grown with us working with CD15. Our Chamber of Commerce in the last 2 years has adopted a safety committee meeting that has partnered with over 20 different nonprofits and local businesses and organizations to help continue to push for what we need to have happen in San Pedro. And what has happened with the collaboration all over town is we have helped to collaborate to support CD15 and our councilman, Joe Buscaino, in his efforts to build 2 bridge houses. We also help push for a navigation center. It is on police grounds at our police station. And the navigation center was really a key component in what we hope for is the continuance of 5611 to help our homeless folks to have a place to put their things. And as we've moved forward past both bridge houses, and we also partnered to help really quell some of the community upset over our supervisor Janice Hahn wanting to build a shelter in the center of our downtown business district. And I'm really proud that that we did do that as a CPAB, as well as helped with the relationship to create a partnership that LAPD would help fund, provide extra funding for the security and patrol in the vicinity of that. But with that being said, some of the greatest work that we've done in collaboration is to really partner with LAPD and learn about the organization and learn about the city so that we could better help as a community to get things done. Our jail sat for many, many years, our brand new jail, and was never opened. And in our quest for wanting more, we've developed a community that wants more, and really a culture of folks that want more and want better from the city of Los Angeles. We want better for our officers, and we want better for ourselves. So what we did was, we really hatched a plan to get our community together, and we did. We had over 500 people, actually trusted folks from all of the community that came out, not once, but twice, at a really key time of where Mayor Garcetti and others were really wanted to listen. We wanted our jail open. We wanted the resources put back in. We wanted to get it on the budget. And I'll tell you, it's so much fun to drive up with 20 or 30 stakeholders to speak in front of the police commission, to put us on your radar. People that have never spoken at a commission meeting before, nor have gone up to the city of LA to speak in front of a city council, let alone public safety committees and or budget committees. But we indeed did get this done. And we did finally, with the commitment from Mayor Garcetti and Chief Charlie Beck and beyond, we did get it on the budget to get our jail funded. But before that, the fun thing is we did get $500,000 for a couple of years to fund our jail van. and a couple of people to help all our officers. Because I don't know if all of you know that, I'm sure you do as commissioners, our officers, with not having a jail, have to drive to 77th to book. And we as community members realized that that took our limited resources off the streets and took them out and spent a great deal of time with booking. We really wanted to help to make sure that we had more resources and that they weren't gone all the time. Now moving forward, we've also put it on the radar. We started as CPAB, two of our great members, myself included, a former member that has since passed, James Diamond, Jim Beza, part of our team. And I helped rally our Congresswoman to speak. Congresswoman Nanette Berrigan is a key part of the Defense Committee that spoke in front of our Port of Los Angeles on the subject of license plate readers. We got it on her radar. And with that, the money was set aside with her testimony and pushing the port. We have a large sum of money that's earmarked, and soon we'll have our license plate readers up and running in the harbor area. I'm really super proud of that as well. So now moving forward, being the platform and having done so much, what we do now is we really concentrate on outreach. We really concentrate on a message of we can all come together with consensus to help ourselves. We try to teach everybody that we have equal amount of responsibility in this as the Los Angeles Police Department does, for us to take care of each other and learn how to be safer all on our own. So I'm proud to partner and to continue to move forward under all these trying times. And I'm also really excited. It's just funny to say this, we're continuing to see different challenges in the harbor area. We recently had a Proud Boys rally at one of our local parks that saw close to 250 Proud Boys that actually did not have a permit. And it's created quite an uproar in our community from all sides that they were allowed under their First Amendment rights, even though they didn't have a permit in a local park, to meet. And we're tackling this as a division. We've already had, it's been brought up at our CPAB, but I'm proud to say that our harbor team is moving forward on a town hall so that we can discuss and get answers. People are really very angry, and get answers as to why First Amendment rights are important, but why these folks were allowed to come to our park without a permit. So a lot of hard-hitting stuff going on in San Pedro and harbor area, and I'm proud to sit here and be part of that team that's going to continue to help with solutions. So I can go on and on because we've done so much. It's mind-blowing. So thank you for listening. And I'm really grateful for this opportunity to have a chance to highlight what's going on so well and so positively, and from all sides in the harbor area with CPAB.
Ms. Sutton, thank you very much. Go ahead, Captain.
I was just thanking Mona. Thank you, sir.
Ms. Sutton, thank you very much for all of your work. I understand that you were extremely instrumental in putting in and helping to have the new jail constructed down there in harbor. And you're right, it is time saving and helps with resources in that particular division. But more importantly, thank you for helping to drive the communities to supporting the police down in the harbor division. And I understood, as you said, when you first started this, you had a number of challenges, from multiple gangs to street crime to tagging to homelessness to halfway houses. How has CPAP affected those challenges that you identified when CPAP was first formed to today? Have they diminished the street crime, the tagging, gangs, or has it at least abated somewhat?
It has. The gangs are, as the gangs are doing what the gangs always do, but it's, how we have now, been taught as a community to deal with it, to think about it, how to feel about it. That's part of the important thing is that CPAB and us really getting together as a community, it helps to quell fear. We have key people in our social media sites and key people in the community, that not just chime in, but that are part of CPAB, not just the executive membership, but our regular membership as well. That really chime in to lend an ear and to lend a voice for positivity and these solutions. And it makes not just everybody feel better and feel safer, but the CPAB collaborative, because we have created sort of a community neighborhood watch like crazy. We have people that are not scared now to come forward and not just to tell me, but to lend an ear to the police department, whether it be on recent shootings or crime, but people really have been made to understand and believe that their voices will help, instead of sitting back and being naysayers that the police department can't do anything, they're not going to do anything anyway. That's been the power of CPAB, sir, is to to put forward to the community that we really do have power and that we can make change. And with our school safety collaborative, we developed a safe passage program. We had a neighbor on every corner. We had a PTA member and parents on corners. We collaborated with, we really settled down our business district a lot and sent a message to all the school kids that they could be safe. And if they, even now today, when they do group up in our area and have big fights, we immediately have a system in place of not just school police showing up, but we have everybody that comes out of their houses and gets on the corner, calls the local principals and their team, and they come out and move the kids along. And we really do have a safer community. We did a huge 311 drive, and we're still doing for all the graffiti abatement. And it's really, really working in the Harbor area.
I really thank you for your community support, all that you're doing down there in the Harbor area. At this time, I'm going to turn it over and ask if there are questions from other commissioners. Commissioner Bonner.
Sure. Sure. I have a couple. Thank you. Thank you very much, Captain. And Ms. Sutton, I appreciate you being with us today. And I've recalled the opportunity we had as a commission to convene a meeting down there. And I think it was either late in 18 or early 19. And more recently participated in one of the CPAB meetings to see some of the dynamics you described here today. So I know there's a lot of commitment, and I have, I think, two main questions for you. One is about just the broader crime situation on crime. And I was asking the chief earlier today a little bit about, the connection between the statistics and the broader context. So I don't have this week's numbers in Harbor, but I think at least as of last week, you had 21 homicides year to date. That was about a 75% increase, I think, since over last year. And the numbers were up. Also, shootings were somewhere around 67 for the year, and shooting victims, that is. And I think ags were up as well. And the question is, in terms of the broader context, what would you, as a I'm asking Ms. Sutton, I think, as a member of the community, just what's your take if someone were asking you about the broader context and perspective? Are you thinking of, crime is up across the board in Harbor, and there's a source of concern in the community, or would you attribute some of this to some of the vagaries of COVID and the pandemic, as some have talked about in other contexts? But let me just ask you to speak a couple of minutes about, your view, especially since you've been there a while. You've seen the stats go up and they've come down. So how would you put this in perspective as to how 2021 is comparing to other years you've seen in the area?
Well, my perspective is this. I have a business in the middle of the busiest business corridor, and I'm pretty much centrally located to see it all, to hear it all, and to see the trends. I think that, my take is that I realize the reasons why crime is up, and the good thing is that many of us are in that unique position to understand the reasons why. Is it COVID driven? Yes, indeed. Many of us believe that it is COVID driven from the isolation and the upset and the angst over and the fear over what might happen, what might not happen during this pandemic. And then, coming through the crisis of what I see thousands and thousands of people in my business. I own a restaurant. So business folks from our area and beyond that want to talk about how they feel, and of course many of you know that I'm involved in public safety, and in that I think the answer to your question is that it's no big surprise or shock that crime numbers are up. Never before has our country experienced being torn at the fabric of who we are as Americans, the way that we have been, with the rhetoric of hate and division that has come to the forefront in the last 4+ years. So for me, it's no big surprise that it's gotten into the heads and and the psyches of a lot of people. We're seeing more car crashes, more hit and runs, more shootings, and people are watching. But my feeling is that because of the amazing work that has been done by the police department and all the outreach that's been done in the harbor area, I'm not really seeing that people are scared. Yes, people are definitely concerned. Like I said, we have some of the highest meeting attendances that we've ever seen. And our goal is to have, continue to push that and continue to outreach and have 100+ and more, and telling our neighbors and beyond, people are really talking. If they don't show up to our meetings, they're talking about what they learned by being able to feel free and open to ask the hard-hitting questions of myself or, Captain Mastic, Sergeant, our Sergeant in Charge, Julie Sohn, and all the SLOs. We have created that atmosphere so that the questions can be asked, and our SLOs get out there in the community like crazy. And that's what really has helped. This partnership of CPAB has helped keep our community calmer and less fearful, whether it be of Proud Boys coming actually into our town and or, what the fear that, was sort of instilled that riot, come into the San Pedro area. And we answered that by having a peace and unity rally with the police department. So I hope I answered your question. I think that this is the secret to our success at Harbor is folks wanting to come forward and be helpful, wanting to listen and not be fearful, because knowledge is really power. And that helps, that helps get rid of a lot of the fear, because then there's hope.
Commissioner Bonner.
I think I'm losing my connection.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Yeah, I said thank you very much. Yeah, I said thank you. I was thanking you, and that you did address the question, although it led to one more. And this, you're okay? You can hear me?
Did I answer?
I'm not hearing her very well. Is Commissioner Briggs, are you hearing?
Was I able to answer your question?
Yes, yes. But I had one more for you again.
Okay.
This is based on the some of what you described here, but also your experience going back to 2006. But you in your report earlier, you mentioned there's an emphasis on in spite of the level of participation you've enjoyed or experienced there, you mentioned that there's a focus on outreach. And one of the things we've been talking with some of the other CPABs about is where you're finding more success and challenges relative to outreach. And in particular, just one example that comes to mind, you spoke at length about the Unity Rally and some of the dynamics following the protest last summer. And a lot of those issues, are talked about oftentimes along racial lines, and there's been some writing and discussion recently that's pointed out that many of the differing views break out in some cases more on generational lines, or age, and so that a lot of the younger people who were kind of called into action last summer have one view of issues and what's to be done, and their parents are more established business owners, and others may have different views. This is what I'm asking is what are you seeing? Are you seeing some success in attracting that demographic? What we've talked here before, I've just said the under 40 crowd, if you will. What's the level of participation, and are you getting a diversity of views in the mix as well?
So, I think to answer your question, I think that I think indeed we have attracted a really, really diverse crowd, including a difference in age groups of what we have historically seen of folks that are used to going to meetings, and the makeup of a lot of the CPAB and folks originally were folks that were more retired and that had time to spend on volunteering. But now moving forward to where we are now, I think that number one, public safety is on everybody's minds. And as we have created, the revolution that we have created with community partnership, and it's so amazingly notable. People have taken notice. They've watched, they've seen CPAB in action and community members in action and it's very attractive. That's one reason why people want to get things done. People want to be safe, and that attracts. We have successfully attracted a lot of different folks to attend CPAB and or pay attention and want to get involved in their neighborhoods. So that answer is yes. It's been interesting to watch the progression of the Wilmington area over the last 15 years. For those of you that don't know, Wilmington has the diversity there is heavily Hispanic, and the beginning of CPABs, it was really, the SLOs were really tasked with trying to get out into the community and opening and cracking open, I should say, that community to get them to trust. So it was really action-based of what LAPD had to do to get in there and make change in the parks and all the gang activity and all the shooting. But we did do that by creating, the first ever that I know of Spanish CPAB. And that Spanish CPAB meeting quelled in their own community. They met separately. A lot of them did cross over into our meeting, but it did eventually happen. And now, they created their own meeting of over 100. And now the Wilmington area has a stronger neighborhood council. They have found a stronger voice through their participation. And LAPD did that in Harbor Division. The SLOs did that by working their matching in all kinds of ways. So the diversity that has come forward to community activism in Wilmington is amazing. We also created the first, although admittedly at this point, our teen CPAB is really no longer no longer going, but we created an amazing teen CPAB over the years that attracted over 100, and we sort of morphed that ultimately into our cadet program to establish one of the largest and most robust cadet program that I think the city has ever seen. But moving forward now, we're continually tasked with continuing to outreach, period, and getting our message out. So the 40-somethings, we're really getting there because we're seeing also a lot more activity and new folks coming into the area that want to get active in neighborhood councils. But when they realize that the meetings are tedious and they really want to get same things done, we're pulling them over to our side in CPAB to come, team up and do things quicker and faster. And people want to see solutions, and that's really what we're about. So does that answer your question?
It does, and I appreciate the perspective as you mentioned at the beginning of your comments that a lot of people, if you're not from or spend a lot of time in the harbor area, that people think of it permits as a port community, and they think of the ports of LA and Long Beach, but forget that there are actual communities there that people, some of whom know of, but have little or nothing to do with the ports, but happens to be the part of the world they're from or that they live in. So I appreciate you bringing that part of the picture, into more vividly in the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bonner. Are there any further questions from any other commissioners? Seeing none, thank you both. Ms. Sutton, you've done an amazing job. Appreciate it. Captain Mastic, thank you so much. This is an incredible feat, that we can hopefully export to the rest of the city and the rest of the divisions. This has been an amazing presentation. Thank you both for everything that you've done.
Thank you, Commissioner.
It's a privilege to serve. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
At this time, we're going to turn to item 5B, the department's report on the prohibition of participation in law enforcement gangs. Bring forth Director Rhodes. Good morning, Director Rhodes.
Good morning. Good morning, all. And as usual, that CPAB presentation is always a hard act to follow. Thank you for having me today. As many of you know, the governor signed into law several bills that impact policing on September 30th. He signed those into law. And today I'd like to present on AB 958, which is a bill that requires 3 things. One, it's that agencies have a policy prohibiting gangs, not just the conduct of individual officers. 2, that the law enforcement agency make participation in gangs grounds for termination. And 3, that the law enforcement agencies require cooperation in any investigation into gangs within their department. The policy, while short, does those 3 things exactly. The second paragraph covers points 1 and 2, and the last paragraph covers point 3. The middle paragraph defines gangs as it is in the bill and in the penal code section, and that is a group that identifies itself by name, symbol, including tattoo, that engages in a pattern of on-duty behavior that violates the law or fundamental principles of professional policing, and then enumerates some of those. I should point out that the department, while it didn't have a policy specifically prohibiting law enforcement gangs, in all of its policies, the policies would be antithetical to having a law enforcement gang. The mission of the department to safeguard the lives and property of individuals and to reduce fear of violence through honor and integrity could not exist with law enforcement gangs. Our core values of service, partnership with the community, integrity, and obeying the letter and the spirit of the law is already in place. And the primary objective to enforce the law fairly and impartially. So although this is a new policy, many of the themes within it are already covered in generic or general and very specific policies within our department. Nonetheless, the law requires that we have a specific policy, and that is what this new policy does.
Thank you, Director Rhodes. Director Rhodes, I have some questions along these lines. I think it's well publicized that there have been gangs in the sheriff's department. I've not heard the same about LAPD. Does the department either A, have a history of having had gangs, Do we have gangs, and if so, what does the department do when they learn that some of its members are affiliated with gangs?
Was the chief, so the, I'm sorry, I thought the chief was speaking. I apologize. So the department, you are correct. And in fact, in discussing this bill, the legislators spoke about the sheriff's department specifically and other departments. This has not been an issue for the Los Angeles Police Department. I will say that, again, as I sort of noted, any gang or allegation of any gang-like behavior would be investigated through the specific and already existing policies of the Los Angeles Police Department. And I think, as this commission knows, the internal investigations of this department are significant and robust. But in terms of a history, I will not say that there's never been an allegation, but it is not historically something that we have had a large issue with.
Thank you, Director Rose. Do any of the other commissioners have questions for Director Rose? Commissioner Bonner.
Sure, thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Rhodes. I appreciate the presentation. One comment just following on that first point. I think there's probably a little bit of definition involved there in the sense of, I think, there have been other situations like the Rampart scandal and those things where there have been multiple officers involved in various kinds of activities that one might or might not put the gang label on, right? I mean, there's been enough, so the idea of investigations involving the behavior of multiple officers potentially working together or not, that itself is not a new, I agree with you that it's not the predominant form of activity and so on, but I also don't want to create the impression that it's something new to the history of LAPD.
Yes, I take your point, Commissioner. You are right, although it is certainly not nearly as recent as what has been discussed by the California State Legislature.
Yeah, appreciate it. So a couple of questions also just in terms of the how the policy may play out. One is that how would a policy, or how would you imagine these investigations? That it's hard to kind of say typically, but how would you imagine these investigations following a public complaint? I mean, I'm not sure how the public would necessarily know it. Would you imagine them initiating following other officers reporting various conduct? I mean, how would you imagine this kind of activity would be an investigation would be initiated?
Well, I would imagine that these investigations would be initiated in the same way that we initiate all investigations, and that is through a complaint, either internal or external. And as you know, the department has been fairly aggressive in taking complaints and investigating them in order to keep their house clean. So I guess I'm not sure I can say what the typical or how it would emerge, but if it emerges in any form, it will be investigated.
Are there or will there be any particular protocols necessary along those lines in terms of setting up some procedure to take, I know that we've had this conversation about bias policing complaints and things of that nature, where there's a fairly specific set of protocols and things that kick in. And is this one kind of handled or captured by any protocols that currently exist, or would there be some additional work along those lines?
Well, I think that the protocols exist. The definition of a gang in the statute and in our policy have numerous different sort of subcategories. And I think that it would be investigated the same way that subcategory would be investigated. So for instance, the policy and the law discuss harassment, discrimination, targeting those who targeted those based on protected characteristics. Those would be investigated the same way they are currently. There are other enumerations of gang activity, including unauthorized use of alcohol or drugs or falsifying police reports, and I would imagine those would be investigated in the same way. Should that prove ineffective, the department can revisit how it investigates things. At this point, with sort of the fact that there haven't been many, I think we would have to see how best to investigate and see how that plays out.
Commissioner, if I could follow
Sure.
up, I think it goes to the elements of what constitutes a violation of this section of a definition of belonging. It'd be a matter of simply, like anything else, proving the elements by a preponderance of evidence. So tattoo, remarks, symbols, and activities that would be presented, and then if that demonstrated by a preponderance a membership or an identity of a gang, then that's how we would proceed against this administratively, in concert with working with the prosecutor as to any underlying criminal offenses, being as far as conspiracies or extortions or theft or violence that was a means of that gang, if you will.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And by the way, there's a lot of things I'm not an expert in, and this is just one on that long list. Having not, I've heard about the public discussions and so on and so forth, but this particular legislation, less familiar with until this discussion. But I'll tell you, one of the things that strikes me at least as, and what I, just to try to get to what is probably an underlying concern here, and that I think is something that needs to be thought about, is it strikes me as this is dramatically different, or the investigations and so on, maybe because I find it hard to believe that you could follow the typical process. You'd have an outcome, have an action against an officer, because if the officer is guilty of participating in a gang, that means there is a gang, and that means that there's multiple officers involved, right? So this strikes me as rare that you would have an investigation that would be solely focused on an individual officer, because by definition, if the activity that they're alleged to be involved with, there's a whole lot of people that presumably would be involved in that investigation. That's what I'm getting at, as to that strikes me as something that's more complicated and more difficult to get to than when you're looking at something that by definition involves the behavior, because in that situation you may have the officers involved in the or maybe the nominal target of the investigation whose behavior may be at issue. But again, if there is something that does fall within the definition of a gang, that means there's a lot of officers and a lot of activity that would have to be looked at. So that's what I'm trying to wrestle with, is what's the thinking about what kind of process might be required to address that kind of situation.
So our existing processes allow for workplace issues that involve multiple individuals, 2, 3, 5, 10, 15 individuals. Think of also police actions relative to a pursuit, an officer involved shooting or use of force, complaint of misconduct by a series of one or many officers. And certainly in our history, we have investigated instances, organizational units such as the Rampart scandal, as well as the Hollywood burglars and others, Ford and Von Villis, who were detectives up in the Van Nuys area, Devonshire area, that conspired to commit murder. These are multiple individuals that required much more sophisticated investigative efforts. But the department, we also have open investigations contemporarily that involve allegations as such, that we have to bring investigative strategies to bear that takes some time to demonstrate evidence of the either existence or refute the fact of the allegations that are involved. So you're right. This is because it is a membership conduct that could be lawful except for certain aspects of definition, identifying it, proving it, pursuing it. Our commitment is to do that. It would involve more. One would expect it to be more intensive in order to uncover.
I appreciate that. And one last kind of bite at the apple, if I could, because you mentioned, or you were comparing, for example, to some of the officer-involved shooting investigations or their use of force investigations, where you may have 10 officers who respond or at a scene, and the tactics and behavior of one or two of them may really be the focus of the investigation and, potentially the ultimate findings. And again, I'm just thinking this one is different in the sense that you couldn't have, because this investigation is not really, the conduct is not specific conduct against an individual or specific actor. The conduct is involvement in the gang, right? So that you couldn't have 10 officers who are the subject of an investigation say, oh yes, they're all members of this alleged gang, if that's the word used, but only one actually did X, Y, or Z. So that's where, in other words, this one is, the conduct is just the very existence and participation in the enterprise, if you will, not about whether you actually did steal anything or take any specific action other than being part of the activity. Is that correct?
Well, I think as defined in the law and the policy, it has to be a gang that engages in a pattern of on-duty conduct. So if you belong to a group and one person in that group does something wrong, that's different than belonging to a group that engages in a pattern. Both need to be investigated. And I'm certainly not giving a pass to people that are involved in gang, but there is, you need to look at what the purpose of that gang is, and then membership in it. And I think that the department does have strong investigative tactics and techniques that it engages in. If you are looking for an exact process, I think that the requirement of flexibility in investigative process is pretty necessary, given that things can be gangs or groups or any kind of activity needs to have the flexibility to investigate that activity, that group.
Yeah, I'll just say that the one I appreciate, the feedback and the information. As I said, it's really in the last couple of days preparing for this conversation is the first opportunity or reason that I've had to think about it. But I'll kind of close with what gives me a little bit of unsettledness. I mean, it's good that as we're sitting here, I don't think any of us are saying, boy, there's a whole bevy of activity that we just need to get out. And now I'm not willing to say, oh, there's I'm not willing to say there's nothing out there because I don't know how one would know, but I'm not saying that I have reason to believe that this is a big area. But at the same time, I think what I'm looking for a little bit and hoping to avoid, I've been, I think, expressed about my concerns about the entire framework of the bias policing setup. And I'm talking about just how, one of the reasons that, in my own opinion, you've had, years where thousands of complaints and none sustained is not necessarily because of the quality of the investigation or this or those things. It's because of the entire framework and the way in which, that the activity is defined. And so you'd have people who use it as a weapon in some cases, making the allegation, and you have to spend time with that. And then you have other situations where where there may be something, but it may not, you may not pick it up. Here, what I'm kind of pointing the same thing is that there's a risk to me that, especially if you're talking about somebody who, did a specific thing that's clearly, people can get their minds around, and then you get to evaluating them versus, okay, what was the group? And then you get to this point of, was it a pattern of practice and all this stuff? It just strikes me as where there's a potential that if we're not thinking about how it's really set up and what the protocols are, that there's some risk that you could have either a lot of people making allegations of this kind of participation, that so it could, it's used as a weapon, if you will, against people and certain who just, spend time together or do what have you. Or it could be, the kind of a major crack that a lot of things fall into, where there is, some group of officers doing something that kind of looks funny and it's hard to describe, but it's kind of hard to get through, and therefore all of these come out, unsustained, if you will. So I'm just noting that, and as I've thought about that more, about that bias policing part of it, that sometimes the framework itself is the problem. I'm not willing to say that that's the case here because I haven't read the statute and I haven't thought it through. But when you're dealing with something like this, where it's the conduct, but it's also just the existence of the dynamic and the potential association with a group of people, that there's just, I think we shouldn't take it too lightly in terms of tightening up how it's going to be thought of and reviewed and enforced going forward.
I agree with you, and I don't think the department is taking this lightly at all.
Not what I'm
Despite,
suggesting, by the way. I'm just suggestion is, yeah, just underscoring. So sorry about that.
no, I appreciate that. And we will endeavor to make sure that these are investigated in the robust and serious way in which others are, with the added emphasis now with this new statute and policy that it looks at not just the individual, but the group. If one exists, if one is alleged, and if proof of one can be seen.
Appreciate that. And by the way, before I let you go, remind me, is there an inspector general have a role in this process anywhere? Or is it just kind of the role that they play with the broader oversight of investigations and the like? I didn't recall anything specific called out here for the IG.
Not a specific role other than in the last paragraph of the policy does require cooperation with the IG. And so that is within the policy, but there isn't a specific what the IG shall do.
Got it.
Commissioner Bonner, if I could follow up with one more, aspect with regard to your question. There are two parts that are of importance with the OIG's role in this. One, just very briefly, was that we did see a draft of this policy and had an opportunity to comment, as we do with virtually every policy that comes before the commission. Just for what it's worth, we had extremely minor comments, all of which were addressed, and thanks to Director Rhodes and OCPP for having that discussion, which we regularly have. It happened here as it does in most cases. The second role, I think, gets to maybe one of the earliest questions that you asked. In addition to being named at the end of the policy as an entity that the department will need to cooperate with should an investigation ensue, is that I think in looking at this allegations that fall under this this policy, I think there are many ways that the department will have to do so. As you said, it may turn out to be that there is a more challenging framework, as I think you correctly have seen with regard to bias policing. I'm not sure we know that yet without seeing what types of things will arise, but it could be. And so the department may need to enhance its sort of investigation procedures for this, or maybe not. I think that remains to be seen, but I think the department, I agree, does sound ready to take that on. In addition, I think there are layers of looking at this problem. So in addition to a specific complaint investigation, an actual CF number that gets handled by the department and overseen by our office, as you're aware, our office has the ability to do our own investigation or to look more systemically at things. So while the department may be, for instance, looking at a particular officer or group of officers to determine did they or didn't they violate this policy, if it seems like, regardless of the outcome of that specific investigation, if there's a concerning trend, concerning behavior that doesn't quite fit into this rubric, but that the commission in particular has a raised eyebrow about, our office is equipped to look systemically at issues and see, is there something beyond the bounds of this piece of paper, of this specific policy, that is still a concern and needs to be looked at in a more systemic way. That's one of the things our office can do too. So I think there are layers of accountability, as with all policies. I think it exists here too, even if I don't have a crystal ball to say exactly how the allegations will arise or could potentially arise, and exactly how they'll be investigated compared with other types of misconduct. But hopefully those layers provide some accountability, and that's a part for us too. Yeah, and I appreciate that a great deal, because I just, remind everybody here that even my questions and comments go as much to, first I take it to heart myself, but also to the commissioners, to the inspector general as you're talking, because in my opinion, if there's one of these that's sustained anywhere, I think a whole lot of people are going to have a lot of questions to ask. I'm saying if there is, some sort of organized, group that emerges, that engages in something that's, a pattern in practice, and there's all of this stuff, that if one allegation is sustained along those lines, I think we all have a lot to answer for in terms of being disconnected or out of touch or unaware. I'm saying everybody through the command staff, the supervisors, the commanders, everybody would have a lot to explain, I think, in my opinion, if one of these allegations is sustained. Now that's, again, that gets you back to why it's important to have a process, but to also make sure that, the investigations are going to be thorough and appropriate. So I hope it never happens, but I'm just reflecting on the point of what it would mean to have even one allegation sustained. It wouldn't be the individual conduct of one bad actor or one bad apple
or just somebody who's lost their way, there'd be a lot of problems that would be, I think, wrapped up in it. So I appreciate that. And Chief, I don't know if you had a closing thought on that, but I'm just making it clear at least how I view it.
Don't disagree. I think it'd be like a burn. You'd have the evidence of the misconduct, the membership itself, but as Mr. as the Inspector General indicated, systemically, how did you get to that type of occurrence? It's the exact aftermath of every other major matter, significance of Rampart, the scandal there stemming from the actions of individuals, and the question really came from is how systemic was that representative and how deep did it go? Hollywood burglars, individuals back in the early 80s. So and other instances of criminal activity by members of this organization is how did it come about? How was it allowed, or was it supported by some informal culture of the organization? And this, what I'm pleased about is that while we believe that the conduct that's described herein was prohibited by other actions, including the Law Enforcement Code of Ethics, this explicitly calls out the elements and affords not just a line in the sand, a designation, a declaration internally, but also a means of which to take action because of clearly defined criteria that make up this law enforcement gang, and things that are lawful, but in concert one with the other, or even in isolation, are unlawful, such as a tattoo or symbol, is what I'm speaking of. That represents the illegal actions of an organization. So a good discussion. Again, it is something that we are prepared for. I think we have the readiness and the prowess of our internal investigations to determine if in fact such an accusation occur or an observation is to pull on that to determine it. But I also join with you that I pray that it does not happen. That's our prevention mode. That's our training, our accountability, our values, our day-to-day expectations, and how we go about that so that we never see such actions occur.
Thank you, Chief, and thank you, Director Rhodes and Commissioner Briggs. Appreciate the opportunity to get a few comments out.
Thank you, Commissioner Bonner. Thank you, Director Rhodes. Have a great day. At present, we're going to go to item 6 on the agenda, the closed session for the consideration of the civilian hearing examiners.
Mr. President, you need to take a vote on that item.
Oh,
Need action.
I move we approve the department's report on the prohibition of participation in law enforcement gangs established. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion been made and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Latino see that it becomes the 6th Latino minority majority district in the city. Additionally, the number of districts from which Latino communities have equal opportunity to elect Latino candidates is not only maintained, but
Madam Secretary, we're going into closed session now.
The Board of Police Commissioners will now recess into closed session to discuss agenda item 6A in accordance with Government Code 54957.
you'll give the board secretary 1 moment. She'll right with us.
Yes.
Bonner owes me a new battery.
Why? Your battery go out while I was talking?
You talked so long that my battery went dead.
Well, for
It's
all the
worth
time-
why it's
all the
worth it.
time- All the time we put on these in preparing for these, that's really the reason I just commented, because if I don't comment, it's not worth doing any of the other
I
preparations.
think it was
so-
totally worth it. I think it's a battery issue, not a you issue.
All right, I appreciate hearing that. That makes me feel better. It does.
If you want to pay for half the battery, it's okay anyway.
At some point at the time we'll have a conversation about, I just spent all this time on a gas generator and now I hear we're trying to phase out natural gas, right? So I don't know, we're going to charge up phones when the power goes out.
Let me check and see where the board secretary is. Give me just a moment.
Is it Steve, your computer battery or your phone battery?
That was my computer battery.
Oh,
For some reason, it just drained fast today.
Mhm.
So that's, the variable is my battery, not Mr. Bonner.
It might go hand in hand, I've been known to, I can probably drain a couple batteries.
Yeah, to drain some battery.
You're funny. Well, at least you got a different background for me.
Mr. President, we're ready to proceed. If you want to call us back from closed session.
Yes. We've returned from closed session. Mr. Tufek, will you please report out? Thank you.
Commission has concluded its business in closed session as relates to item 6A. The executive director's report was approved related to the appointment of 9 civilian hearing examiners on a unanimous vote of 4-0. That concludes the report out.
Thank you, Mr. Tufek. At this present, there being no further business before the commission, I move that we adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you. Everyone stay safe. See you next week.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.